What's up, guys? This is Rob and Steve, and this is going to be our inaugural episode of the Lighting the Lamp podcast. And essentially, this is just going to be a hockey podcast that we're going to try to do weekly once the season starts, but off season, we're just going to start doing when big events happen, if there's like a big trade or after free agency or whatnot. So today's episode is just going to be going through draft, some trades that have been going on, and the free agency period. So, full disclosure, I'm an Islanders fan. Steve's a Rangers fan.
Yeah.
We will tend to talk about those teams a lot, but it's been a pretty good offseason for you guys, actually, up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, we managed to get Capo Caco, right? We managed to jump 3 spots in the draft or something stupid, which is amazing, which is hilarious. But, and then we managed to trade for Jacob Trouba from Winnipeg for, like, essentially nothing. Like, Neil Pionk, a second-round pick, and, like, no, it was Neil Pionk, Winnipeg's own first-round pick. We gave back to them. And then, so it's pretty lit. Oh, there's the Adam McQuaid trade from the deadline.
So there it is. It's the Neil Pionk and a 2019
It's Winnipeg's
pick.
own first-round pick. We gave back to them. We gave them their own first-round pick. We were like, here you go.
So, yeah, I mean, let's use that as a jumping point to go into the draft. So, overall, draft first day, everyone thought there's going to be a lot of trades going on. There was pretty much nothing. Everyone just took the players that they thought they were going to take. What did you think about day one? Were there any really big surprises for you? Or
I mean, round 1 was interesting. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, right? Like, the U.S. National Team Development Program had a crazy run of like 8 players in the first round or something. Jack Hughes at number 1, we knew that. What was it? Then it was like Capo Caco, then what? Dylan Cousins and like Alex Turcotte, and they all went like there was a big run of centers early on, and then like that became the trend. Like, there was a lot of centers going, and they seemed to be like everyone seemed to be prioritizing like size over like big guys, and it seemed to be going faster than smaller guys. Like, I think the big Moritz Seider getting drafted by the Red Wings made no sense to me. They went off the board for that one, which was like, I guess Steve Yzerman knows what he's doing. I hope. But the biggest one was like the biggest surprise probably was that Cole Caulfield slid to 15. He was projected to be in the top 5, maybe top 10, maybe top 5. I mean, the kid scored 76 goals in junior, like playing with the national team. And then he went to the U18 World Championships and was named player of the tournament with 14 points in 7 games. 11 of them were goals, I think. So it's like the best pure goal scorer in the draft slides to 15 because he's 5'7".
So, do you think a lot of that has to do with how that Stanley Cup final played out? Because when we look at the way that the Stanley Cup playoffs kind of went, a lot of teams that everyone thought were going to go far, like the Lightning, the Maple Leafs, you even look at a team like the Calgary Flames, who are a bit of an undersized team. These younger, these faster, these smaller teams, Lightning out in 4 games. Maple Leafs out to the Bruins. The Calgary Flames lost the Avalanche, I think it was in 5 or 6 games.
Something like that.
Do you think the way that the Stanley Cup finals played out, where it ended up being the big heavy team from the West was the Blues?
Played the big heavy team from the East and the
Which is
Bruins.
the Bruins.
I mean, yeah, the NHL's a copycat league, right? So, remember when the Blackhawks won that first Stanley Cup and they were like a bigger, faster team, so everybody went in that mold to win, and then you had the 2011 Bruins win, and they were also big. So then, then it became that run of the Kings and the Blackhawks were both big teams winning Stanley Cups.
They just basically traded Stanley Cups for a while.
Yeah, so, I mean, St. Louis being a big team really was like, the team started to, we were just finally getting over that hump in the NHL of like size being like the defining factor. Like, the idea was that if you could play, you could play. Like, that's finally where we got to. But like now I feel like with that win, it might be a little more like size might be a little oriented a little bit more. Like favorite, like I said, Cole Caulfield's 5'7", slides to number 15 because teams are taking guys like Dylan Cousins who don't have nearly as much offensive upside as he does, but he's like 6'4", and then he goes and breaks his hand and fucking at the prospect camp or whatever. I mean, the guy. Did you see that hit?
That was brutal.
Did you see the hit?
His hand should never be, and a human hand should never be the angle that his arm was at. That was.
I mean, did you see the hit that the guy threw?
No, I didn't.
He just came to the neutral zone. The guy comes through and just hip checked him. I was like, bro, it's prospect camp. Like, what? He went all over the top and he landed on his hand wrong. So I was like, oof.
Yeah, so day one, I mean, there's a bit of a surprise in terms of the order. Not a whole lot going on.
Remember when what was it, Vasily? Remember when Podkolzin was supposed to go number 3? Like, we were talking about like him being the number 3, and then like he slid to 10.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he still has those 2 years left on his contract.
In Russia?
You know he's not coming over for 2 years.
It's the Russian factor. That's why guys slide. That's why those Russian players will slide to like the 3rd and 4th round, because nobody wants to invest in a player they're not going to get for at least, a lot of times 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, and if he wasn't under contract to a KHL team, that might be different.
Yeah.
But he's got, I think it was either 2 or 3 years left on his deal. So there's a minimum of 2 to 3 years that
and there's no NHL
he's not coming over.
Yeah, there's no NHL out clause, I don't think.
One other pick I want to talk about in the first round is Spencer Knight to the Florida Panthers, which, given the way that things are going right now in free agency, is very interesting.
Carey Price 2.0, man.
He's the high. They were saying he's the best draft goaltender prospect to come out since they threw out Jack Campbell's name, and he was a pretty highly touted prospect when he came out, but. It's real interesting, just given the fact that we know, and we're going to get to this also with the trades, that today Florida traded away James Reimer, Roberto Luongo's retired. Their goaltending is wide open. There's nobody on that team right now. So especially interesting that they would go after a goalie prospect, given the way that they're so obviously heavily involved with Sergei Bobrovsky.
I mean, it's alleged, at this point, right? But here's the thing, like, I was watching, like, obviously I was watching the draft, so, like, you have, like, the talking heads, like, depending on which draft, like, which broadcast you either got, like, Brian Burke or, like, Pierre McGuire. But, Pierre, like, they're all talking about, like, you don't draft goalies in the first round, because goalies, a lot of times you don't know how they're going to develop, and sometimes you end up drafting goalies for other teams. Like, look at Jack Campbell. Like, he didn't work out in Dallas, but he went to LA, and he had a good year in LA, and he's actually proven to be, like, a good goaltender finally, and he's, like, 25? So it's like they drafted him, and now he's good, and it's like, oh well, we just wasted resources developing a goalie for literally another team, which is what people are worried about, which is why goalies never go this high. Goalies also are such a crapshoot, to be honest. Like, the guy could be like have the mental, like, be an amazing goaltender athletically, right? But like, he's the mental fortitude of like a toddler. So like, goals go in and he can't get over it, and then that's not conducive to competing at the NHL level. Like, things like, you got to be like. Jordan Binnington is a good example. Kid doesn't go like I don't even know if he was drafted. He might have been like a third, or like I don't think he was really a high pick. He's playing in the minors. He refuses an ECHL assignment. He was a 4th string goaltender. They pull him up to the team. The guy goes like 25-4-1 down the stretch to a Stanley Cup, and then wins a Stanley Cup. Like, in games he'd go out there and get absolutely blown apart, like 7-1. Next thing he'd come out and win 2-1, 1-0. Like, so, like, that's a guy, like, you couldn't predict that kind of development out of him when you drafted him, because obviously nobody saw it. So it's like, goalies are such a crapshoot. So, like, that's why you see them usually go, like, 2nd, 3rd round. Like, even, like, what was it? There was a goalie, was it last year, I think? Like, an American goalie that was really highly touted. He didn't go to the 2nd or 3rd round. So it's like,
it's difficult to really kind of justify going after a goalie in the 1st or 2nd round when you look at some of these goalies that are in the league right now. Henrik Lundqvist, Pekka Rinne. I mean, these guys were like 7th round draft picks. I mean, like you said, you just never know. So taking a guy high, of course you have those examples of guys that went high that panned out. Your Marc-Andre Fleury's or your Carey Price. But there are also guys, like you said, Jack Campbell never developed for Dallas, and they took him pretty high. You have guys that went in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th round that are the best goalies in the league.
Yeah, I mean, like, Marc-Andre Fleury went 1st overall. Like, that happened in, like, 2003, 2004.
I think Carey Price was 3rd or 5th. He was I think he was top 5.
He was top 5. But it's like, that's the kind of thing. Like, imagine drafting Carey Price. Like, I mean, look at this way, right? You draft Marc-Andre Fleury 1st overall in 2003. Goes on to have a Stanley Cup, 3 Stanley Cups to his name. I think 4, right? Or just 3.
He had the one in the early years,
so
he had the
3.
2 back-to-back, and then he played it for Vegas, but they
so he's
lost.
got 3 Stanley Cups to his name, right? I don't think he won the Conn Smythe, but like he might have. But like 3 Stanley Cups to his name, and then you get Rick DiPietro. What was it, 3 years prior? Goes 1st overall, is an all-star caliber goaltender, blows out his hips in the All-Star game,
and that was it.
And then he came
back. That was
back.
his whole career.
He came back. He was okay, and then he blew his groin up. He blew his knees up, and it's like, like Mike Milbury, and then Mike Milbury traded Roberto Luongo away, and Roberto Luongo was also a very highly drafted. Like he went like 4th overall too. Like he was a really highly drafted goalie. So it's like, you know, you just never know with goaltenders in the draft. So it's really, I mean, you don't know with anybody in the draft, right? Like Nail Yakupov goes 1st overall. I don't think he's not even in the NHL anymore. Like, but like usually you have a better track record with like forwards and wingers, and like you don't hinge a whole future of a team on a forward or a winger. Not everyone's Connor McDavid, where you hinge the whole future of the team on him. Whereas like a goaltender is a make or break position, right? Like you build from the back end out. You don't win a Stanley Cup with a mediocre goaltender. You can compete for a Stanley Cup with a mediocre goaltender because the Sharks did with Martin Jones, but like Matt Murray was head and shoulders better than him that year. I mean, he came back down to earth. He didn't have a good year this year, but like he was head and shoulders better than Martin Jones and was playing like an elite goaltender, so he won.
I think it's also just the mistakes that you make in the draft are amplified when it comes to goaltending because, you know, you draft a guy pretty high, like a Nail Yakupov, right? 1st overall pick. He was supposed to be like the next big thing for the Oilers. He flames out, doesn't do anything, goes to St. Louis, doesn't do anything there either. Out of the league.
Goes back to Russia, I think, yeah.
I just think, but the fact that there's every night you field 12 other forwards, or 11 other forwards on the ice. In your minors, there's 12 other forwards you can pick from, plus guys that are scratched. So the mistake, you can kind of hide a little bit. You know, out of the, you know, what's it called? Yakupov busts out. That sucks. He didn't do anything. He's out of the league. But now we got Draisaitl, right? There's nowhere to hide if you're a goalie. When you make mistakes and when you flame out, everyone in your organization knows it. Everyone in the league knows it. Everyone in the building knows it. There's nowhere to hide. So the mistake of drafting a guy high who flames out is just amplified when
it's a goaltender.
And especially like you said, it's such an important position. You know, if you have an off night as a forward, there's 11 other forwards on the team to pick you up. You have an off night as a goalie, there's nobody there to save you. Like
you're essentially like it's analogous to a pitcher, right? Like you're out there alone. You're on an island. Like that crease and the pitching mound are islands. Like you're at like even a quarterback to an extent, right? Like a quarterback has an off night, but if you just are handing it off to his running back and the running back can carry him, his offensive line can give him enough time to maybe overcome that. A pitcher has an off night and he's throwing like meatballs right down the middle. Like he's getting teed off on, and that's all on him. A goaltender has an off night and he's letting in softies from like behind the net. Like that's all on him. There's nothing like maybe the defense can cover up a little better, but like it's really not like if he's just giving them up like.
Well, I think the perfect example of that is the Bernier experiment in Toronto. Like, everyone in the league saw what happened to him. Those goals from behind the net in his first game against the Hurricanes. The one that bounced off the wall and he just let in a softie. The ones that squeaking through him left, right, and center. And that's kind of why his career he hasn't come back to this point because
I think he's in Detroit. Isn't he in Detroit now?
He's just there's nowhere to hide from that. So
no, especially now when you're in Toronto, one of the media centers. It's like New York in terms of media. It's like New York, Montreal, Toronto. Like that's it. Like they're under the microscope. Like the Toronto media is literally watching and dissecting. Like, did he eat that pickle? Like did he eat it? Like I don't know. Like the Toronto media is crazy. So like he obviously couldn't handle that pressure. He's okay in a 1A, 1B role because he went somewhere else after that. And
I think it was Detroit.
He went to Colorado. He played in Colorado a little bit.
Yeah.
Left Colorado after a year.
He's in Detroit now.
I was in Detroit, and he did all right with Jimmy Howard. It was like splitting time with Jimmy Howard. But it's like goaltender. But like then again, here's another good example of a goaltender you draft that you don't really know how it's going to work. I don't think Mrazek was a high draft pick, but like he might have been like a second or third round pick. But like Detroit drafts Mrazek, puts all the chips in the basket. He never pans out for them. He's like he's injury prone, and then when he is playing, he's very like hit or miss, right? He's like a lot of like on nights, off nights. He's really inconsistent. Goes to Carolina this year. What was it last year? He's inconsistent for a little bit in Carolina. And all of a sudden this year he decides he wants to play.
5th round draft pick, by the way.
Martin Mrazek.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, so still, like
but he's like that's just the third to last round in the draft.
Yeah.
So
it's like they didn't put all that, but like when he got there, they put all their eggs in his basket. But like he finally decided, like they ended up developing a goaltender for Carolina because he carried Carolina to a conference final. Like he was better. He outdueled who they play? Oh yeah, he outdueled Braden Holtby in the first round. Right, in 7 games, he managed to come out on top. He comes out on top of the Islanders because like making like those games are close. He was making a lot of saves he shouldn't have been making. Right, but then he blows his knee up. But then Curtis McElhinney comes in and is just made of ice. Apparently, like that was amazing. 38, 35 years old, never plays a playoff game. It's a shutout. I think I was like, okay, calm down,
That
Curtis.
guy's a professional, like a true.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Traveling backup professional goaltender.
He's like what's it called?
He's like a Martin Biron. Like
he's a blue collar guy. He's a blue collar guy, man. He's not like a superstar, right? There's always the best in the league, like Carey Price and stuff. But you always gotta have your everyday guys, right? Like he goes in, he puts his work in every day in practice, and when the team needed him, he came out on top. Like he was exactly what they expected as a backup, which is what you want. And then Mrazek came back in the conference final, didn't look great against the Bruins. I'm pretty sure he was still the nagging injury, but that's what it comes down to. Like, you never know with these goaltenders. I guess is like you get back to the original point. Like they just, like you said, and it's amplified, right? Like Detroit was like, oh my god, like he's so inconsistent. And then you have Jimmy Howard, who's also inconsistent, but he's also battling a lot of injuries. He's also older. Like Jimmy Howard, like it's like, oh my god, like this is bad. But like,
yeah.
But then you have the Islanders, again, not to pick on the Islanders, these are just the picks I remember. Like, they drafted Griffin Reinhart 4th overall or whatever it was. They traded him away for nothing. Like, they traded him away as part of things. I think it was part of the Jordan Eberle trade.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure and you got the first round pick with it, too, I think, which ended up being Matthew Barzal, which is, like, wild. But still, like, you essentially went straight up 1-for-1 Jordan Eberle for Griffin Reinhart. Griffin Reinhart's not even playing in the league. Like, Griffin Reinhart's playing in Bakersfield, I think, their AHL affiliate. I don't think he's ever going to make the NHL.
He can't skate, and we knew that going into the draft. And the thing that bothers me with that draft so much is we could have had Jacob Trouba and Matt Dumba, and everybody in the league knew he couldn't skate. And that was the big knock on him. They were like, he's a big body, he's got decent puck-moving skills, but the guy can't skate to save his life. Lo and behold, when you enter a skating league... Oh, no, the Eberle trade was Eberle for Strome.
So they went 1-for-1 there, yeah.
But yeah, the guy comes in the league and everyone's like, dude, like he skates like he has cinder blocks on his ankles, and you can't do that in this league.
To be totally fair though, John Tavares also was touted as not being able to skate, but John Tavares had franchise level talent, which is different.
His skill was enough to make up for that deficiency.
Like he managed to get
skill was not enough.
And then John Tavares didn't skate like he had cinder blocks. He just wasn't like quick. So he worked on that.
If you want to watch a comedy lesson, just watch John Tavares play 3-on-3, because you would think he should be good, but the minute he turns that puck over, it's game over.
Well, he's not exactly Austin Matthews, right?
But speaking of Toronto, let's talk about them for a second, because you were just talking about the Hurricanes and the Maple Leafs, and they made a deal for Patrick Marleau goes to the Hurricanes, and then he gets bought out. They tried to give it to play.
That's the thing. They tried to give it to play, but he had a clause in his contract. The only team he could actually approve a trade to play for would be the San Jose Sharks. San Jose couldn't take on that actual contract, right? So they find a dance partner in Carolina who's like, "Hey, baby, we'll take on this awful contract." They give him a first round pick in it. So they managed to get, in order to take on a terrible contract they knew they were going to buy out because they had the cap space, they get a first round pick. So it's essentially a 6th round pick for a first. Like it's some dead cap space. That's really not a big deal because Toronto also has to eat some of that dead cap space.
It's like weaponized cap space at this point, because the cap is not as high as people thought it would be. So the fact that the Hurricanes had this room, they weaponized that into a first. The weird thing about that...
do you want to talk about weaponized cap space? The New Jersey Devils turned weaponized cap space into PK Subban, one of the elite defensemen in the league.
Yeah, so let's talk about that actually as well, because fun fact about PK Subban, the past 2 trades that involved the defenseman over $8 million have been him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was traded in a Shea Weber straight up 1-for-1 deal. He goes to Nashville. Nashville, he played 3 seasons there.
It was only 3 seasons?
It was 3 or 4 seasons.
Wow.
And then they don't do what they want to. They got to the Cup Finals once, lost to Pittsburgh. And now Nashville's sitting here saying, whoa, we got to sign Roman Josi next season.
Right,
and we got to give him close to PK Subban money. He's getting close to $8-9 million.
Easy. And
then Nashville's also sitting there saying, well, Duchesne's on the market, and we want him.
We want a top flight center, even though they have Ryan Johansson. But I guess Ryan Johansson's not the type of player they thought he was going to be.
So they're sitting here saying, well, wait a minute, we don't need... And again, I don't think this is a knock on PK Subban at all. I think everyone in the league understands who he is and what he brings to the team.
They love him. They loved him there. I don't think, like you said, it's not an indictment of Subban himself. It's just that that contract is AIDS.
And it's just one of those things where the Devils have the room, and now the Devils have arguably one of the top 5 defensemen in the league. I know he had a down year last year offensively. He didn't put up the numbers he wanted to, but I would still argue that just in terms of his skill, his talent, and then just what he brings to that locker room.
He's also a good, like, there's a lot of X factors he brings, right? Like like he can be a unifying factor in that locker room. And the Devils also are in a unique situation where some of their best players are still on entry level contracts. Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes are going to be on entry level contracts. Those are your top two centers. And then the biggest contract you're paying out right now is Taylor Hall, who, by the way, is a pending UFA next season. So so depending on how this goes, like the Devils, do you think part of this is all a bid for the Devils to be like, look, we're competitive, Taylor, please stay?
Because I absolutely think that's part of it, because I think this John Tavares thing has scared the GMs in this league. I think they're because before that it wasn't really
franchise players never walked.
You know, when Steven Stamkos was supposed to get traded at the draft 3 years ago, he stayed and then he re-signed. You know, guys, this was it had been a very, very long time. I mean, Sidney Crosby, when his contract came up, he signs a very team-friendly $8.7 million contract. The guy could arguably get $12 million.
He signed it the day he was eligible to sign it. Like, it wasn't even like he waited. He was literally like, oh, my contract is eligible, we renegotiated, and he signed it, like, right away. Like, that July 1st, he was, like, inked it. Like, that's not an indictment of John Tavares as a person either. Like, he went where he felt like he could be competitive, which is whatever.
No, I'm not saying that's
an
indictment
on franchise players, like, he wasn't after the money. They just offered him a lot of money. Actually took less money from Toronto than San Jose. San Jose offered him more money over the same term. But whatever. Anyway.
But yeah, franchise players didn't walk. They didn't walk, but he walked, and I think that scared a lot of GMs. I think
it also, like, scaring GMs. I think it also empowered a lot of these players to be like, oh, I have the leverage here. Like, Taylor Hall is a Hart Trophy winner, 95 points, 30 points more than anybody else on the team. The next closest player was Nico Hischier with 55 points. So 40 points. There's a 40-point gap between him and Nico Hischier. He blew his knee up this year. Had a little bit, like, so he didn't play most of the year. Taylor Hall is still far and away your best player. Like, you know, so I think, like you said, like, it's teams, like, it scared a lot of teams. Like, they're like, oh, fuck, like, we could lose our best player because it's not a guarantee he's going to re-sign with us because he could hit the open market and get teams are willing to shell out like that kind of money now.
Well, I think that's what in my opinion, that's what I think that's what the Jeff Skinner contract is all about. Not that Jack Eichel's going to be a free agent anytime soon, but I think they signed him to try to convince him to not ask for a trade because, I mean, let's be honest here, Jack Eichel has had pretty much no help on that team since he basically came into the league.
No, I mean, this year he had a decent team. Like, he had an okay team. They just decided not to play down the stretch.
And that's not an indictment on, like, Sam Reinhart or any of those guys.
They just weren't ready.
But, I mean, it's like Crosby has always had Malkin.
Always.
And he's always had Chris Letang.
He's always had Marc-Andre Fleury, too.
So he's always had support when it comes to other guys. Steven Stamkos has always had somebody, whether it was Richards when he first came in, then it was St. Louis, now it's Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point. The reason John Tavares walked is he really felt like he had nobody. I mean, who was the second best player on that team besides Barzal because it was his first year?
Right.
His next best player was going to be Josh Bailey. Well, and don't get me wrong, I love Josh Bailey.
But he's not the same.
But that's not a name that inspires you to stay. That's not a Evgeny Malkin kind of name.
That was my argument with the John Tavares thing, just like a sidetrack. That was my argument with the John Tavares thing for the longest time was like, people are like, well, you know, and I'm like, well, yeah, for years you did nothing to convince him to stay, and then all of a sudden you have a blitz, like a last second blitz to try to win the game, and he'd already decided like the game's over. Like he'd already seen enough. Like he'd seen the mismanagement of the front office for so many years. And granted, you get Lou Lamoriello, who's a Hall of Famer, right? And you get Barry Trotz, which is like there's like the bedrocks of stability in the NHL, right? But like it was too little, too late, and he wasn't really sure what he was going to get out of that roster. I mean, joke's on him, right? They get to the second round, Toronto loses in 7 games, but Toronto goes 7 games with the Eastern Conference champion, and the Islanders get swept out by Carolina. So it's like
it was an onside kick when you're down by 21.
Pretty much.
It was
too far gone already.
So I think that's a lot of what. So yeah, getting back to the Devils and the Predators thing, and this is a really interesting offseason for Nashville specifically because
they could be a worse team tomorrow if they lose out on Matt Duchene than they were a week ago.
They can be a basement team. I mean, I honestly think they could be one of the worst teams in the Central Division because PK Subban's gone, and they don't really get a replacement for him in this deal. They get Steven Santini, who's young, okay. Jeremy Davies is young, okay, but
you get 2 second-round picks out of it.
You're not getting a replacement roster player. It's not the Subban for Weber deal.
Right.
This is not a hockey trade. This is a cap space trade. and then Simmons is walking. He's gone. He's out the door.
Brian Boyle's gone.
They tried to convince him to stay. He's walking. If you don't get Matt Duchene and you miss out on all these other big players in this free agency, because there's a lot of names in this free agency, but if you miss out on these guys, and again, this is kind of a weak free agency in terms of defensemen. There's not really a lot of great ones on the market. If you miss out on Matt Duchene and you miss out on him and he decides to sign like 5 or 6 days in a free agency and all the other guys are gone, I mean, you have to make a trade, or you have to play the cards that you're in your deck right now, because you're losing your best defenseman, arguably. Well, not, I'd say second best to Yossi. You're losing a top 6 center in Wayne Simmons, or a top 6 winger.
And then a middle
Arguably, Brian Boyle can be a middle 6 center or winger, whatever you want him to play.
He's a big presence in the power play.
And if you don't get anybody in free agency, I mean,
what did you do? You essentially made yourself a. Well, that's the thing. That's such a new development in the NHL. Like in the last since the salary cap came in, but really lately since the cap crunch came down hard. Like it didn't grow as predicted. So it's the salary cap itself is a commodity now. Like cap space and weaponize being able to being a team like the Rangers who have a lot of usually how it used to work is bad teams had a lot of cap space, so you'd weaponize your cap space, take on bad contracts, and accumulate picks and young players, right? It's essentially what Toronto that's why Toronto has players like Nathan Horton and David Clarkson on rosters, because they'd weaponize the cap space to get assets in return. Because in order to take on that contract, the other team would have to give you something else, because you're not gonna just help them out, right? As much as you might like the other GM, it's like the league, you don't get by in this league by being nice. You don't win by being nice.
Right.
So things like that, but then there are teams with a lot of cap space that I feel are mishandling and don't seem to understand. Like Vancouver has a lot of cap space, and I don't think they know what they're doing with it, right? It's not a ton, but it's a decent amount of cap space. There. So it's
they're sitting on about $17.5 million at the moment.
Okay, so $17.5 million is not.
And they have 32 players on their contract, so they really don't need to sign that many other guys.
Right. So they have $17 million. They have just free money, right? $17 million, and they went out and got JT Miller, which is okay, I guess, right? Whatever. I've never had an issue with JT Miller when he was a Ranger either, but that's a good played with top level talent. It's a good 60-point guy, right? But you have Brock Besser, who's still on his entry level deal. Oh no, he's an RFA, so his entry level deal just ended, right? You have the biggest blessing they have is that Bo Horvat and Elias Pettersson are already under contract. Elias Pettersson's got 2 more years on his entry level deal, and they signed a Horvat for 4 more years.
Yep, he's signed through 2022, 2023.
Right. So I mean, you have the Cats, right? You re-signed Alexander Edler.
Who, by the way, I mean, that's a great contract for Vancouver. I mean, to get Edler at $6 million, I mean, I get he's 33, but if he wanted to go to market, I mean, he could have easily gotten, I think,
it's only
7
2 years,
and a half.
Dude. They managed to get good term out of it. 33-year-old defenseman for $12 million.
I mean, he's bought into that.
They also have Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is on an entry-level deal still.
And he's probably arguably the best defenseman on that team. I mean, knock on Alexander Edler, but Quentin Hughes is probably the best defenseman on that team.
Well, Quinn Hughes is nuts. He's so good. So it's you have him, right? Then you have they're letting who'd they let walk that I didn't understand. I mean, Troy Stetcher is still under contract. They're letting Ben Hutton walk, which I don't really understand because Ben Hutton's not that old. But yeah, so it's and they're gonna go out they're in the middle of their rebuild, right? They're acquiring young players, they're developing young players, and I think in their mind now they're well, maybe we can be competitive, and we're gonna go out and they're gonna try and sign Tyler Myers. They've been connected to Tyler Myers since his contract came up in Winnipeg, and he's in for 7 by 7 years, $7 million, and I think he's 28, 29.
Tyler Myers.
So you're gonna be committing to Tyler Myers at till he's 36.
Yeah, he's 29 years old.
Okay, so you're committing to Tyler Myers until he's 36 years old, right? He's not a bad defenseman. There's nothing wrong with Tyler Myers. He's big, he's strong, he's a decent puck mover. Not a bad defenseman, right? But for $7 million for 7 years? We've seen those contracts go bad. Dion Phaneuf's contract was like that. Dion Phaneuf was young,
he
good.
got bought out because of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's just I mean, Dion,
I don't think that this is gonna sound. I mean, not to say that I don't think Tyler Myers is worth the money, but
when Jake Gardner's a year younger and you get similar point production for probably less, you're probably better off with something like that. I don't know.
Vancouver's in a weird
Jordy
spot
available?
because they're not a basement team anymore. I don't think this recent trade for JT Miller, I mean, that kind of indicates to me that they're willing to take on that cap that he has, which means they're going to kind of make a push to be maybe not playoff bound, but competitive.
But I just think they might be in a weird way handcuffing themselves and like to do in order to do it. You know what I mean?
So
Like taking on contracts like that when in reality, like your team really didn't like. They kind of hung around the playoff race for a little while last season, but like at the end of the year, like it was very clear that they were not a playoff team. You know what I mean? And they're still. I don't think they're a playoff team. Like they have Thatcher Demko and the Jacob Markstrom as their goaltending tandem. So like that's not bad because Markstrom was really good for them. But like
I think they could be a playoff team if the Pacific is as bad as it was last season.
oh, it should be
Because the Pacific Division last year, I think it was like 4 out of the 5 bottom teams ended up being from the Pacific. I mean,
Well, I mean, look at the Pacific Division. Like, none of the teams got any better in the Pacific Division this year.
they
Like,
arguably got worse. I mean, the Ducks just bought out Corey Perry.
the Kings are still the Kings. Like, they're still another year older, right? Like, a day short of dollar. What is it? I don't remember the saying. Like, I don't remember the saying. Like, a day, whatever, $1 short, whatever.
A day late and $1 short.
That's it. Like, that's it. Like, and they're handcuffed by a lot of really bad contracts, too. Like, they're handcuffed by a lot of bad contracts in LA.
Let's look at, the Western Conference. The Kings, Oilers, Ducks, and Canucks were the 4 bottom teams in the
Right.
Western Conference, and they all came from the Pacific Division. And like you said, the Kings haven't gotten any better.
They've gotten older.
Arguably, they've gotten older and worse. The Ducks, at this point, aren't getting any better. They just bought out Corey Perry. They don't want to deal with his contract anymore. And his production had been slipping. I understand that.
He's
But
got a lot of injuries. He's also old.
so they arguably just got worse. And they haven't... And the crazy part is, like, none of these teams have really been connected with these big free agents that have been going on. And the Sharks, I mean, again... older and older. They just keep getting... And Joe Pavelski's going to market at this point.
And they're losing their captain because they decided to sign Erik Karlsson to that $11 million contract. Erik Karlsson's like the highest paid defenseman in the league, I think.
And they're losing not only a captain, but they're losing a guy who could arguably, if he really wanted to, if he was on the right kind of team, I mean, I think he could put up 35 to 40 goals again.
Joe Pavelski? He scored 38 last year.
I think he could do it again. So
If he goes to the Stars like he's being projected to, if the Stars manage to get both Joe Pavelski and Matt Zuccarello on that lineup, like...
And granted, I mean, they have $14.8 million right now. San Jose does.
But they have 2 RFAs that need to get signed. Timo Meier and Kevin LeBanc. They need to sign them.
And they only have 3 defensemen, 4 defense. Oh, no, they have 6. But, I mean... There's that defensive core sitting at Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, Vlasic, Dylan. Okay, I can understand that. And then you have Jacob Middleton and Radim Simek. I've never even heard of those guys. Combined with the fact that, let's be honest, you don't have an elite goalie in net. You just don't. You have a serviceable goalie.
And you have Aaron Dell as your backup, who's kind of a dumpster fire sometimes.
But you don't have... And then the thing is, not only do they have these guys under contract, but they had to trade away Justin Braun to the Flyers, who, by the way, congratulations to the Philadelphia Flyers for turning themselves from a total dumpster fire into
Arguably
what looks like a competitive playoff hockey team in a matter of like 3 days.
I mean, they got 2 defensemen.
They traded for Matt Niskanen, and again, this whole cap space crunch thing, they trade Radko Gudas for Matt Niskanen, straight up. Which is like, the Capitals needed that money real bad. And the Capitals even had to trade away Burakovsky because they still don't have the money for the players that they need. Then the Flyers go out and trade for Kevin Hayes for, a 7th round pick?
Yeah, they trade for his rights and then sign him to a $7 million contract, which is like...
that's one of the... I mean, that contract sucks, but...
Oh, it's terrible.
In terms of the player they got back for a 7th round pick... I mean, what did Winnipeg give up for him? I don't even remember. Like a 1st and a 2nd or something?
For Kevin Hayes?
Yeah.
We got Brendan Lemieux, that first round pick that was the 20th overall pick that we gave back to them for Jacob Trouba. The Rangers essentially turned Kevin Hayes into Jacob Trouba and Brendan Lemieux.
And the Winnipeg Jets turned all of that into a 7th round draft pick.
Yep. Kevin Cheveldayoff did not exactly come out on top of that one.
That is ridiculous.
But that's also the cap. Like, they have to sign Patrick Laine. Do you think Patrick Laine gets a bridge deal? Or do you think he signs like the Austin Matthews contract? Because the bridge contract's gone. Like, do you remember when young players coming off their ELCs used to get like those 3 or 4 year deals at like decent money? Like now they're just like Austin Matthews ELC ended. And that guy got like a $9 million contract like handed to him.
I think the reason that the bridge contract has kind of gone to the wayside, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the players are starting to recognize that, listen,
There's no reason to have one.
you know, as much as we want to say that these guys are going to have long, tenuous NHL careers, you just never know. And let's be honest here, the other part of it is Austin Matthews can go out and put up 90 points. For what reason does he have to sign a $4 million contract? I mean, he's putting up numbers with the best players in the league, and in their mind, they're saying, look, I put up 90 points last year, and you were paying me $925,000. I mean, I'm putting up points that are like top 5 in the league. Pay me like a top 5 player. The idea that these young guys are, oh, you can't consider this guy a top 5 player in the league because he's too young, that's gone. So these guys are saying, look, I'm a top 5 player in the league. Pay me the money. Now, Winnipeg is real interesting because they have a lot of money kind of floating around right now. They have $23.8 million. I mean, they need to sign a lot of players. They only have 7 forwards, 5 defensemen under contract at the moment.
I think a lot of that money is going to end up invested in both Kyle Connor and Patrick Laine. Like,
Laine is getting $8.5-9 million minimum. I mean, the guy can put up 40 goals like with a flick of his wrist. It's ridiculous. And I think he's going to get paid. I mean, look, if Blake Wheeler's getting 8.25, I mean, Patrick Laine is going to be asking for at least that amount of money. And that's not a knock on Blake Wheeler, but
I mean, you also have Mark Scheifele on one of like the most team friendly contracts in the NHL. They have him for another 5 years.
and
at
Nikolai
6.1
Ehlers
million.
is a really good contract too.
The Ehlers is probably gone, to be honest with you. So, wait, did they re-sign him recently?
He's on a deal until 2024 for $6 million. This is probably one of the best
The Brian
teams.
Little contract's bad. That's a bad contract.
Yeah.
That's about the only one. But they signed when he was younger, so.
This is probably arguably one of the best teams in setup in terms of cap because they have really team-friendly contracts. Like Mark Scheifele could probably be making 7.5 somewhere else.
He could be making Blake Wheeler money. Like, look at his numbers.
And even Connor Hellebuck is only making 6.16, which
Yeah, I mean, like, look at his statistics.
he put up 84 points last year. I mean, the dude
38
is
goals.
I mean, the dude is ridiculous. I mean, that's a super, super, super team-friendly contract. I mean, let's not beat around the bush and pretend that he's not worth
And he
more.
had 5 points in 6 playoff games, and the year before that he had 20 points in 17 playoff games, 14 of which were goals.
I mean, the dude is a great player. So the fact that he's only making 6.1 is ridiculous. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers, again, $6 million. If he gets back to form and becomes that 60-point guy that they think he could be, that's a great contract. But you have to sign Laine because if you don't, I mean, here's the thing. The offer sheet is a real interesting topic that we can talk about between Mitchell Marner and Patrick Laine.
Do you think anyone's actually going to get offer sheeted, though?
I think
I mean, like, there's a real threat of it, but, like, is it worth 4 first-round picks for Mitch Marner?
even if a guy gets offer sheeted, they're going to have to match it. I mean, let's be honest here. I think there's a possibility that Mitch Marner takes a pay cut with another team to force the Maple Leafs' hand. Like, I could see him accepting a offer sheet of, like, $9 million, which is under those 4 first-round draft picks, just to kind of force Toronto to say, look, are you going to pay me the money that I'm worth? Because they probably don't want to pay him that much. I mean, they can't afford to pay him that much.
Which is the funny part, because he's the best player on that team.
like,
easily the best player on that team. Like,
they can't. I mean, the crazy part is right now, you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, they got a break from Carolina.
Yeah.
And they got lucky. And yeah, they have 5.5. They can put Nathan Horton on long-term injured reserve and get another 5.3 out of that. So they can arguably have up to 10.8. Marner's getting 9 or 10 million of that. And you still have to sign a defenseman.
I mean, the Zaitsev trade is still, like, pending. Someone on Twitter was saying, I think it might have been Bob McKenzie or, like, Pierre LeBrun or one of those guys. They're saying, like, there's apparently the framework of a Zaitsev trade to Ottawa. So that's interesting. But and they're gonna try for it. They don't want to do it beforehand because they need to pay him his signing bonus, so they have to wait till after tomorrow, which is like tomorrow by noon, when his signing bonus gets paid, they'll probably see him get traded. But like, I mean, everybody thought they were gonna trade
Kadri was supposed to leave.
or
Kapanen was supposed to get traded.
That's it, yeah, and Kapanen's still there. They signed him for 2 more years, for less than he's worth too. But the funny thing is like the Nylander contract. Nylander said to Marner like, you don't have to sign, like you can hold out, and it's like, yeah, you held out for until December, and like you came back and did absolutely nothing for them this year. So like, sure you can hold out, but like Mitch Marner is the best player on this team. If they want to go anywhere, like they need him, and like. That's not a knock on Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews is a 40-goal scorer in the NHL, but like Mitch Marner is just an all-around, is a more dynamic player. Like he does more on the ice. He's a great passer. He can score goals. He's got great hands. He sees the ice better than him. Like,
it's just scary for Toronto because Mitch Marner has all the power in this situation.
all the leverage, man.
If he sits out for half a year like Kadri did, or not Kadri, like William Nylander did, does that hurt him in the long run? Maybe, but I don't have a hard time thinking that Nylander's going to come back next year and be the player that he was.
Yeah.
He got off to a slow start because he was rusty. That's to be expected. I think next season he's going to be back to his 60-point ways. So if Mitch Marner really wants to sit out, he's 22. I mean, he's arguably got another 13 years left in him to play in the National Hockey League. And the Toronto Maple Leafs need him. Let's be honest here. If this roster that's spending $47 million on forwards and $16 million on defensemen goes out and drops the ball when they're paying 2 players a combined $22.5 million, if this roster drops the ball because they didn't sign Marner, I mean, that's all coming down on the GM's head. And whether that's fair or not, that's just the reality of the situation.
Fair because he's the one that's mismanaging the situation. Like, you get Austin Matthews on a contract, fine, right? Like, Austin Matthews is your future captain. He's the best player. He's, like, your team's, like, future, right? He's the face of the franchise. But it's like, Mitch Marner is a guy you don't win without. Like, he was the best player on the ice for them most nights of the season. John Tavares doesn't have an almost 50-goal year without Mitch Marner. That's not saying anything about John Tavares. John Tavares on his own could be a 40-goal scorer. He did it with the Islanders. He was, like, a 85, 90-point guy on a team that had no help. But then you see like how much better he can be with like when he gets the help. He's almost a 50-goal scorer. He was chasing Alexander Ovechkin for the league leading goals all year. So it's like, if you can elevate an already franchise level talent to be even better, like you're gonna let that guy go? Like, are you serious? Especially when your team is poised to win now because you invested all this money in this guy who's 28 in his prime. Like, you need to win this cup in the next 3 to 5 years. Because otherwise, like, it's all coming down. Like, you're going to have to start shedding pieces just to try to stay competitive. There's going to be a big cap crunch in Toronto.
Well, I mean, just look at Morgan Riley. I mean, in 3 years, this guy's unrestricted.
Yeah, and
he deserves way more money than $5 million.
I mean, he's going to be getting close to the Subban money, probably.
I mean, he was in talk up until the last month of the season. He was in talks to be a Norris Trophy candidate.
He should have been a Norris Trophy
candidate.
candidate.
He had a really shaky last month, and the playoffs didn't help him out either. But up until the last month of the season, this guy was in a Norris Trophy talk, and he's getting $5 million. I mean, you don't get that you don't have that luxury for much longer.
The other thing is, like, they took on the Jake Muzzin contract, right? They traded for Jake Muzzin, had 2 years left on his deal. It wasn't exactly a rental. Like, they got him, they knew they were going to get another year out of him, which is, like, always nice. But, like, when you're a team in a cap crunch and you invest in a player who's now, what is he, like 20? He's 30 years old, he's making $4 million, and, like, it's kind of at the expense of your 22-year-old, like, franchise winger, like.
And Frederick Anderson's contract's up in 2 years. He's going to be 31 when his contract is up, and he's going to get, if he continues to play like he does, he's going to get like Tuukka Rask money. He's going to get like $7.5 million. And it sounds like we're nitpicking. Oh, he's going to get $2.5 more million than he's making now, but that's $2.5 million that Toronto does not have.
Well, and it's also you have no idea what the cap's going to look like. Like, the cap compressed this year, so it's going to go to $83 million. It only went to 81.5. So it's like,
it's money that they don't have, and it's a player that they can't afford to lose. I think what's going to end up happening is, I think Marner's going to get offer sheets by somebody, and Toronto's going to be forced to match, and then they're going to have to figure out how they're going to field this team.
Well, it's funny. Like, when was the last time somebody got offer sheeted?
It was Ryan O'Reilly out of Colorado.
Was it? Because I remember when Shea Weber got offer sheeted too. That might have been before that, though.
I'm pretty sure the last offer sheet was when Ryan O'Reilly got offer sheeted out of
Yeah, Calgary
Out
offer
of
sheeted them, I think,
Colorado.
right? And then like Colorado matched it like immediately. That was a different situation though. Like they had the cap space and they were just
They just didn't want to pay him.
Yeah, and he just took
And
it.
then
He-
somebody forced their hand, and they were like, "Well, I guess he's worth it." And now the guy's a Conn Smythe winner, so like,
Yeah.
jokes on you.
I mean, he almost quit hockey because the city of Buffalo destroyed his love of the game. But like that's a different story for a different day. But like, yeah, no, I mean, it's just like the Shea Weber contract did the same thing. Like, what was it? Philly offer sheeted Shea Weber with like
Yeah.
it was like a 10-year, $100 million contract or something stupid. And then Nashville was forced to match, and then Nashville got put in that cap crunch, and they had to trade him away. They traded him to Montreal.
So just two other trades that I want to talk about, and then I think we can end talking about our specific teams, just because that's what we know most about. I do want to touch on the Phil Kessel trade from actually yesterday, as of the day we're recording this. Phil Kessel goes to the Arizona Coyotes. Alex Galchenyuk comes back to the Pittsburgh Penguins. The way I view this trade is I think this is the Penguins kind of admitting the window is maybe not fully closed, but it's not open anymore. And I think they're kind of admitting that we're going to be okay with getting younger to kind of retool and build for the future. Because otherwise, why are you trading Phil Kessel? I mean, his contract's not great, understandably, but the dude scores goals, and he has been for Pittsburgh.
He's a point of game player this year for them.
So I think, to me, that's how I view this trade. Pittsburgh is saying, look, I mean, we just got swept out of the playoffs for the first time in God knows how long.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. Like, it's Pittsburgh admitting like that. Not exactly that Zed is dead, but like we're not as dominant as we were. So
It's not
like,
automatic.
So maybe we should like, and it's not like they're not admitting to like rebuilding, right? They're not tearing it down. Like, they're keeping all their pieces in play, but like they're getting a little younger to try to retool. Like they're doing what the Bruins did. They're trying to get a little more competitive by getting a little younger piece by piece slowly. Like Alex Galchenyuk could be a really like low risk, high reward player for them because like he scored 33 goals for the Canadians. What was it, like 4 or 5 years ago when they drafted him. Like he was a third overall pick. Like he's got all this talent. He just for some reason never fits in anywhere. And you see him like some of the plays he makes. You're like, why doesn't he do this every night? Like he could be the best player on the team. But you say like he's riding shotgun with Evgeny Malkin now. Like even like a Nick Bjugstad. Like he's riding shotgun with good players. So it's like he could turn into like that 30 goal scorer that they're looking for like no money. Like he's not making a ton of money. So that's good. And then it's good for Arizona because Arizona gets a Phil Kessel, who's a name, he's a face, right?
He's going to sell tickets.
To play alongside of their exciting young team. Like now it's gonna be him, Derek Stepan, Ekman Larson, Clayton Keller. Like they have an exciting young team, and they're fast now. Like now the team can skate. Like 'cause Phil Kessel can skate, Clayton Keller's fast, Ekman Larson's fast. They have Jacob Chikrin who can skate. So it's like it's not like the old Arizona Coyotes were boring. Like they weren't very good. They were boring. Like they're actually a pretty exciting team. Like
If Ronta can stay healthy, I mean, the team could arguably
they
be
can
very
make the playoffs.
competitive.
I think they can make the playoffs. I mean, like they have the long-term injured reserve of Hossa on the books, but like that's whatever. But like.
I mean, this team isn't hurting for cap either.
No, I mean, and they traded for Carl Soderberg. I forgot about this. Now they made their top 6 even more competitive. Like,
they have $1.7 million, but they have everyone signed. Ekman Larson's under contract.
The only-
Stepan's for 2 years. Soderberg's under contract.
the only RFA they really have to sign is probably Lawson Krause, but like,
Clayton Keller still has another year, so they have another year to figure out what's going to happen with him. So they've got and Goligoski contract's up in 2 years. So his will be off the books.
well, the thing that's nice about when the Clayton Keller contract comes up is Brad Richardson's money comes off the books, Carl Soderberg's money comes off the books, like so, and like
You'll
Darcy
have-
Kemper's money comes off the books. So it's like
You'll
you'll
have
have
flexibility.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like Michael Grabner was decent for them until he got hit in what was the eye with a puck or whatever it was. Like he had
Yeah.
the eye injury.
that was.
So like they have like the team can be exciting and competitive. Like that's that'll be nice.
So, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
I was gonna say like if their division's as bad as it was, I don't see any reason Arizona couldn't make the playoffs
Yeah,
this
well,
year.
the Pacific was horrible. So, last kind of specific trade I want to talk about before we can talk about our teams. James Reimer goes to Carolina. Peter Mrazek's going away. I mean, he's going to market. Carolina took a huge step forward this year. I mean, nobody expected them to do what they did. They were essentially the same story as the Islanders. Nobody expected them to do what they did. They were written off. This
I
team's
knew they were
garbage.
gonna. I said they were gonna make the playoffs at the beginning of the year, and people laughed at me, and I was like, "Who's laughing now, motherfucker?" Like,
So, but here's the big question. With Mrazek leaving, and like you said, Mrazek was arguably one of the better players on that team, do you think Carolina next season is going to be as competitive as they were this season.
If they manage to get a goalie, yeah. Because they traded Scott Darling as the other piece of that trade that went back to James Reimer. He's getting traded there for the purpose of being bought out.
Right.
So you get James Reimer, who's a serviceable backup. Could start games if you had to, but like he probably shouldn't at this point. It's been so long since he's done it. Like I don't think he could take on like that level of responsibility anymore. But like, say you're still trying to get Sergei Bros. They're still trying to sign like say, you're Peter Mrazek and you swing and you miss, right? You don't get him. But like, you still have Semyon Varlamov on the market. Like you have goalies that went to market. That
Jake Allen's still on the market.
Jake Allen. Like you have goalies that are going to market that like in theory, you can replace and like
Robin Leonard.
Like Sergei. Like I honestly think like if they really should try for like Semyon Varlamov because like he's a proven track. Like he did really well with the Capitals to get them into like all those Capital teams in the early 2010s. Before he lost the job to Neuwirth and then ultimately lost the job to fucking Braden Holtby. But still like.
And he did really well.
Michael Neuwirth is also going to market because Philly's not going to re-sign him.
Yeah, and I mean he's hurt right now, but when he's healthy, he's a
decent.
solid goalie.
Yeah, he's decent. So it's like, I mean, and like when you have the best you're the best young defensive core in the league, in my opinion. Like you have Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Slavin, and Justin Falk, Brett Pesce, like TVR. Like this is a good team. Like this is a good team, and you have. Your forward core is very good.
Svechnikov is still on his entry level contract, and I mean he can play, and he can play big time.
And he showed in the playoffs he could play, like until he got beat up and concussed. But like, hey,
like what are you gonna do on that?
Right? Yeah, he challenged Alexander Ovechkin and got a face full of fist and got knocked out. So like, what are you gonna do? But Sebastian Aho proved he's easily one of the best young forwards in the league. Martin Necas is a guy that they're looking to develop, and like Martin Necas is a pretty high draft pick. He takes a step forward. Now he's a number 2 center. Like this team could be really, really good. Like Niederreiter was great for them down the stretch. He was great in front of the net. They got like Toivo Teravainen's good. Like it's Jordan Staal is still decent. Is still a good player. Like it's not a bad team. They just need to get a goaltender now. Like, and if they get a goaltender in like free agency, like I don't see why they couldn't compete for a Stanley Cup. To be honest with you, they're young, they're fast, they can like. They're talented.
Do you think it's fair to say, let's make a couple of assumptions. Assuming the Blue Jackets either replace or revamp and have most of the team together, let's say they find a goalie, right?
Right.
Let's assume the Islanders replace Leonard or Lee, should both of them leave. Say they bring up like an Oliver Wahlstrom and make a trade for a goalie or sign a Jake Allen or a Neuwirth or a Semyon Varlamov.
Right.
Do you think it's fair to say that any team in the Metropolitan Division can make the playoffs?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the Rangers.
Given.
Well, think how wide it open is, right? Like even like Washington's not a sure shot anymore after they like gutted their back end, like.
And Burakovsky's gone too from there.
So it's like they're not and Orpik retired, so like they're not a sure shot. I mean, Pittsburgh just admitted to the league that they're trying to get younger. They didn't think they were as competitive as they could be. The Flyers are like a big question mark. Columbus's team is pretty much imploding. Like they're losing their franchise winger, the first line center they traded for, the second line winger they traded for, their franchise goaltender. Sure, they still have Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's amazing. I love Pierre-Luc Dubois. They have Seth Jones, who's easily going to be a Norris Trophy candidate in the next couple of years. But then, like in net, you have Joonas Korpisalo, who's got all the talent in the world and can be an elite goaltender in the NHL, but like he doesn't look like he's there yet. So it's like, okay, who knows about them? The Devils and the Rangers are both like in a weird. Like the Devils and the Rangers are in the same spot. They're both rebuilding, and depending on how the young players decide to play, like depends on whether or not both teams can make the playoffs, right? Like if the Rangers, if Capo Kakko steps in and becomes a 40-goal man, and Vitaly Kravtsov comes in and starts scoring like he's supposed to, and Lundqvist plays like he did last year, which is amazing, but the best hockey of his career on one of the worst teams the Rangers have ever had, but whatever. Like there's a chance they make the playoffs. Like the Metropolitan Division, like, and it's not that it's a bad division. It's just that all the teams are in a really interesting place that like they could in theory make the playoffs. Like I think Carolina, if they get a goalie though, like to me if Carolina gets a good goalie, right? Like if they get like somehow they might swing a Bobrovsky or like a Varlamov or something. Like the Varlamov one makes more sense to me. Like I think that's a guaranteed playoff team. Like that's to me that's a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup that should make the NHL playoffs. I don't see why they wouldn't, right? Like they're not going to be a wild card team again. Like I think they'd win. They'd be in the divisional spots.
I think that, making those assumptions. Like if Columbus doesn't replace the two players they're losing, they could very well be a basement team.
Again.
But I think you're going to see the difference between the first place team in a Metropolitan and the last place team in a Metropolitan, I'm going to say right now, I think it's going to be less than 10 points. Because I think these teams are just going to beat each other up over the course of the season. I think you're going to see a lot of the season series between these teams splitting. I think, you'll see a lot of Washington winning 2, Carolina winning 2, Islanders winning 2, Devils winning 2, Pittsburgh winning 2, Columbus winning 2. I think a lot of the teams, so there's going to be so many points that are split in this division. I think more so than any other division in hockey, I think every team right now in the Metropolitan has a shot to make the playoffs. So let's kind of end it on the two teams we know best, our hometown boys. Let's talk about the Rangers first, because I think there's more to talk about there. Jacob Trouba, still need to sign him. He's still not under contract yet.
But they have the cap space to do it, so it's not a big deal.
The Russians are coming over.
Yeah.
the Cold War is over. The Russian players, Kravtsov's coming over. Shesterkin's coming over.
Igor Rykov came over. It's funny because you think like the Rangers traditionally have never been like a big contingent on like Europeans, right? It's been mostly Canadians, some Swedes mixed in. It's like the core of this team that they're building for the future is mostly European. It's like the big pieces that we drafted are Capo Kakko, who's Finnish, Vitaly Kravtsov, who is Russian, Heedle's Czechoslovakian or from the Czech Republic. Sorry, Uchnevich is Russian.
Georgiev.
Elias Anderson is Swedish.
Georgiev is Russian.
Is Russian from by way of Belarus. I mean, our franchise goaltender was Swedish. Like, our defense, Libor Hayek is Czech. And then you have some guy like Jacob Trouba's American, Brendan Smith is whatever. But like Adam Fox is American. Like some Canadians, but the Rangers really they proved they weren't afraid to go out and draft players from leagues that traditionally teams tend to stay away from. All right, like you don't really draft that high from the KHL because you don't know when they're coming over. The Rangers got lucky; they drafted these guys and they're coming over, right? And then how can I fit Mika Zibanejad, our franchise centerman, is a 26-year-old Swede. The Rangers are really doubling down on this European model, and you know what? It worked for Detroit, right? Detroit's team was built mostly on a European there's no reason it can't work.
Fedorov,
there's no reason it can't work, right? There's nothing there's no knock on European players. It's just interesting that the Rangers decided this was the route they're going to go because generally you have guys that they'll draft mostly you have the Don Cherry model, right? Mostly good old Canadian boys, right? That's the thing. But if they can play, they can play. There's no reason they can't play. The Rangers have 11 forwards under contract, right? Or they have 11 forwards on the roster. They have 2 RFAs they need to sign, right? And then the Rangers, in theory, have the cap space to go out and sign Artemi Panarin if they really want to, right? And from what I understand is the Rangers are in on Artemi Panarin, right? If you have the cap space, pretty much every team that has the cap space is in on Artemi Panarin. The Islanders are in on him. The Rangers are in on him. Florida's in on him. What I understand about John Davidson's thinking is he's not going to enter a bidding war with another team to jack the price up. If he's going to try and leverage us to use us to leverage the contract for more money out of another team, we're not going to play the game. We're not going to play ball, which is understandable because there's no I'm not saying that we don't need him. Every team could use an Artemi Panarin, right? But when the Rangers are in the position they're in, it's not it's not gonna
he's not a franchise altering player for them right now.
It's not make or break for us right now, right? We're not expecting to compete for a Stanley Cup.
You're not the Sharks who have maybe another 1 or 2 years to compete for a Stanley Cup.
Right, I think we have another 1 or 2 years before we even start competing for a Stanley Cup. But I think when we get there, the Rangers will be a really good team. If this talent all pans out, this will be a really good team. And then it's funny because the Rangers now have an interesting conundrum. We went from having the worst prospect pool in hockey because we were just dumping picks to try to win the cup for all those years. That arguably the Rangers have the best prospect pool in hockey right now. They have a ton of high end talent. Jeff Gordon's not getting nearly enough credit as he should. He leveraged a bunch of older aging players and a bunch of prime aged players on expiring contracts into blue chip prospects and draft picks that turned into blue chip prospects.
Just take a look at the Kevin Hayes trade. He got Brendan Lemieux, who's a 23-year-old. He's gonna be a bottom six
winger,
grinder who's gonna score goals when he has the opportunity, and he got a first-round pick out of that. From a team that traded him then for a 7th-round pick. That blows my mind. Jeff Gordon, that's one of the best trades in hockey.
But then Jeff Gordon then turns around and leverages that same first-round pick he got from Winnipeg back to Winnipeg for Jacob Trouba, who's a
25-year-old
number 1 defenseman. Yeah, we managed to get a franchise number 1 defenseman out of that. For Neil Pionk, who I liked Neil Pionk, but Neil Pionk was never going to be a Jacob Trouba.
No.
Neil Pionk could be like a bottom 6 defenseman who's like good on the power play, right? Like he could skate, he could shoot, but like his defensive zone coverage was absolutely dog shit. But like that's not what you were expecting out of him. So it is what it is. I mean, Tony DeAngelo is really good. I like Tony DeAngelo. He's probably gonna slip into that like number 4, number 5 defenseman spot with like, which I mean to be fair, he committed to playing better defense this year and he was actually really good at it. So like he wasn't really good, but he was good. So it's like, and he has all the offensive upside, right? So. But then the Rangers also have a really interesting. The question for a long time with the Rangers was like, "Oh, Henrik Lundqvist, what do you do when he's gone?" It's not like it's like we have 2 viable options in net now. If and when he decides to call it quits, like you have Georgiev, who's proved he can play at the NHL level. Like he started most of the games down the stretch with the Rangers and kept them in a lot of those games and proved he could be an NHL starter. Like the Rangers weren't very good and he lost a lot of those games, but like he himself was the reason we
fall.
Right. Like we were only losing like 3-2, 3-1, and like in the games we did get blown out, like he held them in there for so long that like they then eventually like, he just couldn't do it, right? And then you have Shesterkin, who is, apparently the second coming of Christ. Like, he's Henrik Lundqvist incarnate, right? Like, he's amazing. He made an amazing save in development camp the other day, like, on a 2-on-0. He, like, laid out, stretched out, and snagged it with a glove going across the net. He's huge, too. He's a big guy. I think he's, like, 6'2" or 6'3". Like, it's nasty. So the Rangers actually have, like, promising, like, prospects in all these positions. And then, like, there are guys in the system that like maybe aren't, might develop into something, maybe not, but like you still have like Ryan Lindgren, who's supposed to be an NHL player at some point. Like you have guys like that. Like Libor Hayek's probably gonna make the team. Like he was really good until he got hurt. He separated his shoulder, I think. He took a really awkward hit. Adam Fox has all the potential to be like a top 4, top 3 defenseman in the NHL. Like he's got all the skill. I mean, Brendan Smith's never gonna play for this team again. Brady Shea has been nothing but a disappointment the last couple of years. Like he signed that big contract and like he hasn't really done anything with it. Like.
He's still young, so
25.
he's still turning around.
He's just so inconsistent, and like some nights he looks like he's the best player on the ice, and other nights he looks like he doesn't.
He looks like he's lost.
He looks like he doesn't know where he is or who he is. Like it's amazing. Mark Stahl is Mark Stahl, right? Like fans are gonna complain about him. They don't want him on the roster, but it's like
he's only And here's the thing that I also want to talk to you about.
Mark Stahl is a true blue blood Ranger. Like that man is a New York Ranger through and through.
The Rangers right now might be in the best position out of any team in terms of the way that they've structured the cap. Because when you look at 2020, 2021, you have a lot of these big contracts coming off the board.
Right.
So Kreider's contract is up, Nemestenkov's contract is up, Strome's contract is up, Vesey's contract is up, Bolesky, Fost, Brett Howden, and then the year after that, Shattenkirk, Stahl, Brendan Smith, Henrik Lundqvist is in 2021, 2022. The thing that's really good about that is you have a world of possibilities for your young guys. If your young guys start asking for money 3 or 4 years down the line, if they sign the right contracts for these players, so say you give Chris Kreider another 4 years, $5 million, right? You give Nemestenko maybe, 4.5 if he's worth that to you. The Rangers can structure these contracts exactly the way they want it to. It's not like Toronto, who
it's kind of piecemealing this together.
Right. When they pick up certain guys, he's already on a 6-year deal. Well, we're just going to have to eat that. Or the Sharks or the Golden Knights, which I think is one of the Golden Knights' biggest problem now, is they made all these trades for all these guys, and they're on these contracts that exist already.
But then they go out and sign. I mean, you're not going to let Mark Stone walk, right? Mark Stone's one of the best players in the league. Like that guy is.
You have to sign him.
Right. He's one of the best forwards in the NHL. But like 8 years at whatever he's making, like.
Yeah, and they're just running into this issue where their contracts exist. The Rangers, if they want to structure this, they can structure this team in anticipation of these young guys asking for big money, and have an extremely competitive team.
They could also structure it in a way that like. They could look at it and think, okay, like they'll just pull up like an Excel spreadsheet, say, right? Like, and just like project, because like they're gonna have all the advanced analytics that we don't have on hand. And like, okay, well, we expect to be competitive by say the Rangers want to be competitive, like Stanley Cup competitive by 2021, 2022, right? Like that's when they say like our window's opening, we want to be there, right? So you have all these contracts come up, right? You also can structure this now in a way that like you have the room to take on rentals and not burden yourself, because like. Even like honestly, the Chris Kreider contract, like he might get traded. He'll probably get traded when free agency opens if he doesn't resign, because the Rangers aren't going to carry that into the season this year like they did with those other players. Because we're not in that position anymore. We're not looking to like carry a player, showcase him, and trade him. Like we're like, okay, well, like we're just going to trade him.
People know what he is at this point.
We're just going to trade him because we don't need to hang over our locker room all season, because like it really proved to be detrimental to the Rangers locker room.
And then what if you start playing him and he gets hurt? Now you can't trade him. Now you have a guy who's...
Yeah, so I'd imagine Chris Kreider either signs or gets traded like close to the following July 1st. I mean, but yeah, it's like the Rangers are set up in a really, really interesting way. Like, Henrik Lundqvist comes off the books, right? The Rangers aren't going to let him walk away. Like, Henrik Lundqvist, he'll be 40. He'll probably retire when his contract comes up. So it's like there's no cap or capture penalty at that point, right? But then it's like, in those 2 years, Georgiev and Shesterkin could become like a really competitive goal. Like, they have time to, like, Shesterkin has time to develop and get used to the NHL ice, right? Because he's already been playing professional
Used to
hockey.
the American game.
He's already been playing like
Or not the American game, but the
North American game.
ice, because it's smaller, the shots come in harder.
They come in faster. Like the shot decisions come in faster. Like there's not as much skating. So it's like he has time to get used to that over this season. Say he just spends this season in the AHL and then whatever, and then like Georgiev just proved he can play. So it's like okay, that's not a big deal. And then like Georgiev, when it's time, like they'll both be like 22 years. They'll both be 25. They're the same age. They'll be 25. Henrik Lundqvist didn't come over until he was 25. Like, he didn't start playing for the Rangers until he was, like, 24, 25. Like, they drafted him in 2000, he didn't come over until 2005, 2006. So it's like, it's not like it's a detrimental, right? Like, goalies generally start playing when they're a little older anyway. So it's not a big deal. And Henrik Lundqvist retires, moves out of his way, goes on to be, like, a brand ambassador for the New York Rangers and the organization, right? Because the greatest goaltender to ever play for the team.
He might honestly just end up being, like, the goalie coach. Like, I could easily see him coming back to that. I mean, I think he's going to stay in New York in some capacity. It's like what they're saying with Luongo. He's probably going to work for the Panthers.
What better brand ambassador do you have than Henrik Lundqvist?
I think he'd make an excellent goaltending coach for you guys.
I don't
but
know.
That's kinda...
I don't know, because like some of the most talented athletes in the world don't make good coaches because they don't know how to explain it. They just do it. Think about Wayne Gretzky coaching the Arizona Coyotes. He couldn't translate to them what he was thinking
a good point.
because to him it just happens, right? Like he gets on the ice, he sees the opening, he goes for it. He can't explain to you how to find that opening. Whereas a guy like Rick Tocchet, who's a fourth line banger in the NHL, fourth line banger, it can explain to you how to get there because to him he watched the game for so long. He saw the great players do it, so he understands like okay, well I watched. He's an X's and O's guy, whereas Wayne Gretzky's just like God-given
intuition.
Talent. Yeah, he got on the ice and he just was nobody was gonna stop him. So like that's really like the difference. Like I don't know. I think Benoit Allaire is a great goalie coach. He'll probably keep working with the Rangers. But I think Henrik Lundqvist, after he retires, will definitely end up working for the Rangers in some capacity. I mean, his number's going to get retired. There's no doubt about it. Like,
I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Oh, easily. He's going to go down as the greatest goaltender to never win a Stanley Cup.
He'll be up there with Kippers, those 1 and 2 as the best goalies to never win a Stanley Cup.
I mean, Roberto Luongo never won a Stanley Cup either.
Do you think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Luongo? Oh, yeah. He's number 3 on the all-time win list. I mean...
Very interesting situation
he's
there.
Be.
Yeah, so... That's kind of Rangers story. We'll talk about the Islanders kind of briefly. There's not a lot to talk about with this team.
Do you let Anders Lee walk?
If I had a choice, no. If I had a choice, I would sign him today. And I think here's what I think is going on.
I mean, you have $20 million in cap space. Like,
here's what I think is happening. I think Anders Lee is asking for 40 goal scorer money. I think the Jeff Skinner contract fucked us because Anders Lee scored 40 goals last year, or not last year, the year before last year. Last season he had a bit of a down year because he really bought into, and everybody on the Islanders had a down year in terms of offense because they bought into the Barry Trotz defensive system and it worked. We swept the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. Everyone thought we were going to get blown out of the water. So everyone had a down year. I mean, even Barzal's numbers dipped. But I think Anders Lee is probably asking for close to $7.5-8 million.
But here's my thing, right? He's your captain. Are you gonna let your captain walk 2 seasons in a row?
If I had a choice, I'd sign him unless he's asking for $10 million. If he's asking for anything less than 9, or if he's asking for 9 or less, I'm signing him today.
Like the $7.5 million contract, like the Jeff Skinner contract's comparable because Jeff Skinner's numbers are pretty comparable to his over the course of his career.
Right. So
Jeff Skinner's a little younger, but
I'm signing him if it's my choice. If he's asking for anything less than $9 million, I mean, if he's asking for $9.5 million, because I love Anders Lee. I don't think he's ever going to score 40 goals again. I think he's a 30-goal scorer, which is fine. It's perfect. I mean, but his game is so intangible. There's a lot of, like, things you don't see. The screens he sets up, the deflection. Well, the deflections you see, but...
He's also the captain. Like, that's another intangible he brings to the ice that you really don't.
So if he's asking for anything less than $9 million, I don't care if he's asking for $9 million over 7 years. I'm signing him. He's worth the money. He's not even that old. But I think the big hang-up is, and this is what you saw with Lou Lamoriello in Toronto, is... He's a very sturdy, I guess is the word I'll use to put it nicely. He doesn't budge. If he doesn't think you're worth the money, he's not paying you.
No. He's also very methodical, right? Like there's a process to this that I don't think we're not obviously on the war room,
Right.
In the Barclays Center where like they're laying their spreadsheets out and they're figuring it all out, right? But I mean, is he doubling down on this idea that like, okay, like is he hoping that free agency opens tomorrow at noon, right? Like bang, 12:01, it's open, and players are already like signing contracts because like the free agency window's been open for the last week, and even though you're not supposed to like negotiate
You're not
terms,
supposed to talk terms,
but you absolutely do. There's no way the league can
Yeah.
prove it, but you're 100% talking numbers
Right.
and term, and that's why those contracts get signed so fast because there's no sticking points. It's like we have the contract worked out. Like technically, it's tampering with the team that they're currently signed to, but like there's no way to prove it, right? So
I mean, you have to assume that these guys have been talking to other teams in the middle of the season anyway.
I mean, just to gauge interest, maybe.
Yeah.
But
So
like, here's the thing, right? Like, do you think he's like they're looking at it going, okay, free agency opens. They're banking on him not going in the first, like the first, because he's like there's like the top tier of free agents and he's like the middle tier, right? He's
Right.
he's in like that Ryan Dzingel tier that'll go like maybe later in the day. So do you think they're sitting there going, okay, do we take a run at Artemi Panarin and Matt Duchene to try and replace this goal scoring? And if we swing and we miss, we still have Anders Lee to fall back on because he'll still be there. I think the Islanders are taking a run at Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, that's kind of. He visited. What's his name? Panarin visited with both them and the New York Rangers, the Islanders and the Rangers recently. So like, it's very clear like they're in on him too. But like, the Islanders can sign both him and Sergei Bobrovsky, which is something that like no other team can, like outside of Florida, can offer, and they seem to want to play together. So. But, I think that's kind of what's happening. I think they're getting ready to take a swing at big money free agents, and if they miss Anders Lee, they're hoping Anders Lee is still there when they come back down. Even if they can't replace him, then like Ryan Dzingel maybe, but still.
I think the other thing that Lamoriello is also saying is that we have guys in the system that are ready to play. I think Kiefer Bellows and Oliver Wahlstrom are two of the players that theoretically they can play in the NHL next season.
They have great shots. They both have NHL level shots, so.
If Lou wants to do that, which again, Lou is not a very aggressive GM in terms of making moves. I mean, we saw that at the trade deadline.
You know what's funny? You say that, but he was when he was with the Devils. When the team was highly competitive, he was, because he would go out and make those moves for players. Like, so I think it's just it's different situations, right? Like he never got to that point with Toronto, and like they were super competitive.
Yeah.
Like he was never in the Stanley Cup, the driver's seat where they were getting ready to win a Stanley Cup. Like Kyle Dubas took over right as they got ready to become a Stanley Cup contender. So like. With the Devils, though, like Lou Morello is like he's very steady, very like whatever. Like he's not afraid to go out there and pull the trigger on something he thinks is going to help the team if he has to. So like, you know, I think like that could happen here too. Like if he thinks the Islanders are ready to compete, like he could go out and just like trade for somebody or like make a move for somebody, or go out and spend the money because like he thinks that they're ready to compete now. And, like, they proved they could compete. Like the Islanders could in theory compete for a Stanley Cup.
If the Islanders get two pieces, I think they can compete for a Stanley Cup. If we get, three now.
Right.
If we get a shooter, and I mean a shooter, not somebody who's a Jordan Eberle, he's a shooter. No, we need, obviously, not him specifically, but we need an Alex Ovechkin, Vladimir Tarasenko type guy, especially for that power play, because every team in the league knew that the only guy that was going to shoot on a power play was Ryan Pulock, and he's playing at the point. We need a guy like Ovechkin who's just going to shoot it every time because the threat of a shot can be even more of a weapon than a shot. Because when you watch teams penalty kill against the Islanders, they're very spread out in their diamond because they know, or they're very tight in their diamond because they know the shot's not coming. They don't have to challenge those boards. So they clog up the middle because that's the play we try to make. We pass it to the middle for Clutterbuck or Brock Nelson, whoever's in front of the net. When you watch teams PK against the Capitals, they have to be aggressive on those boards because Kuznetsov or Ovechkin is just going to rip a one-timer and it's going to be in the back of your net, which opens up the middle of the ice. We need a guy that can shoot. We didn't have that last year. Brock Nelson, as much of a shooter as he is, he's not. Jordan Eberle, as much of a shooter as he is, he's not.
Even Anders Lee isn't like a 40-goal scorer. Anders Lee, most of those goals are scored from like
he's a garbage man, and I love him, but he's not a shooter.
No,
we need a guy who's just gonna shoot. So a Bellows or a Wahlstrom can do that, but
I mean that's what they're supposed to be doing. Like that's what you drafted them for.
If we get a Kiefer Bellows or if we get an Ovechkin or Tarasenko type player, a volume shooter,
right,
we need a top 4 defenseman to just kind of round it out. Not even like an elite top 4 defenseman. I'm talking like
a Colin Miller kind of guy.
A Colin Miller or even like a current Jacob Trouba. I think Jacob Trouba will be a top 2 defenseman in the league at some point, but as he currently stands, a Jacob Trouba type top 4 defenseman, and whatever goaltending situation ends up happening. We can't go into next season with Greiss as our starter. As phenomenal as he was last year.
I think you're going to end up with Leonard. I think Leonard's going to resign. I think what's happening is Lou's lining up all these really high-end free agents, see if he can knock them down, and if he can't, then like he's got his guys. He knows like he's probably talked to the agent and been like,
he's like, look, if we can't get somebody, we'll sign you. But
which is kind of shitty to say to somebody, but like it's the truth. Like your franchise goaltender's hitting the market,
so I think those are the 3 things. If we can lock down it, and we don't even need an elite goalie. I mean, I love Robin Leonard. Don't get me wrong. I think he was playing above water last year. I don't think he's a below 2.25 guy. I think on an average basis, you're going to get 2.5 goals against, 915 save percentage, which is fine. And that's, given the way that Barry Trotz has this team playing, that's all you really need.
I mean, it's serviceable.
So if we get a goalie, whether that be a Leonard or a Varlamov, or I would have said Talbot, but he's on his way to Calgary at this point, it seems like. If we get a top 4 defenseman to kind of round it out, because then you have Boychuk. Nick Leddy's apparently on the block. We'll see if he goes, if he gets traded somewhere. You have your Boychuk, Leddy, Pulock, that top 4 guy, and then you can play Devon Toews because he needs to stay in the NHL, and then you have take your pick of Hickey, Mayfield, or Pelech. I don't think we need Pelech and Mayfield on the same team. I don't know why. They've been on this team together because they're very similar defensemen. I think you take one of the 2. But yeah, so that's the case, and then we need that top 6 shooting winger, especially for the power play. And look, if Lee walks, it sucks, but given that we have both Eberle and Nelson now, you can look at the top 6 and arguably say Barzal, Eberle, Nelson, Bailey, Beauvillier, and then take your pick. I mean, you can bring up Kiefer Bellows, you can bring Oliver Wahlstrom. Michael Dal Cole has the Griffin Reinhart problem where he's got talent and he can't skate. He can't, like, watching him play is so frustrating because you know what he can do. He can't skate and he's lazy. But arguably that can be your top 6 right there. But if you sign that top 6 shooter, then your top 6 looks like Eberle, Nelson, Bailey, Barzal, Beauvillier, top 6 guy. Then you just round out the bottom 6 with the guys you have, and I think that's a competitive team. I think, is it a Stanley Cup team? On a good day, maybe. On a good day, maybe. But
I mean, St. Louis didn't have any of that, like a really elite high-end. I mean, they Tarasenko was like an elite high-end goal scorer, but it's not like that roster. You didn't look at it, didn't blow you away. It was a good roster, it was solid, and that's pretty much what the Islanders are building, is a solid roster.
And we finally have a coach that knows what he's doing. We have one of the best goalie coaches in the league. Mitch Korn is a friggin' miracle worker, this guy. He's responsible for Braden Holtby Braden Holtby, another 7th round pick, or a late round pick, or he might have been even undrafted.
No,
turns him into an elite goalie.
He's like a 4th or 5th round pick.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking for the Islanders here. Before we go, hot take for the season or free agency?
Oh jeez, hot take for free agency. I think Florida manages to sign both Bobrovsky and Panarin. As much as I wanted to come to New York, I think they're just for some reason the Russians love Florida. Like they managed to get Pavel Bure, Jovanovski, like guys like that all managed to go play down there. So I think you're gonna see a really competitive Florida team in a really kind of okay division. I think they'll make the playoffs on that. Buffalo, I think, will end up making the playoffs after the trades they made for their back to stabilize that back end. They got Colin Miller, some guys that'll play. I don't know. I think that's probably like hot takes. Like, I don't know. Who do you think's gonna be the biggest winner of free agency? I guess whoever gets Artemi Panarin, right?
Right. Yeah. Whoever wins the Panarin sweepstakes is the big guy. My hot take, way too early. Hot take. Whoever signs Jake Allen is going to get top 5 goalie in terms of next season in the league. I think Jake Allen has a massive chip on his shoulder. I think he's probably very upset at the way that he got treated by the media. I think, and let's be honest here, was he playing great? No, but were a lot of those games his fault? Not really. I would argue that the team played leagues and miles better
for Binnington.
Binnington was on the starting goaltender sheet, so my way too early hot take, whoever signs Jake Allen, I think he's going to have a rebound year. I think he's got a massive chip on his shoulder. He's probably very upset. And he's shown before that he can be a starting goalie and a good one at that. So, yeah, that's my super hot take early on. Whoever gets Jake Allen is probably going to get a guy who's going to be top 5 in terms of production next year. Will it continue? Probably not. I think he's an okay guy. But I think next year he's just going to play. I think it's going to be the Robin Lehner effect. I think he's just going to be playing with this energy that is very difficult to contain once it gets going. So
I can see it.
That's going to wrap it up for this episode. We'll probably do another one once most of the big free agents are off the board.
Yeah, no, at least a week or so. Because like you imagine, like by the end of the week they'll all be gone.
And then in terms of the off season, we'll probably do one maybe at the beginning of preseason, and
closer
then
to training camp.
once I guess we could do one once training camp wraps up. Once they start announcing the young guys that are going to make the roster for day one, we could do an interesting who made the roster.
What do you see? Like we could do a training camp one to see if they invited to camp anyway, because that's always interesting. See who even gets invited.
And then once the regular season kicks off, we're going to try to keep it weekly. Maybe we can do, if it's kind of a down week, maybe we'll do bi-weekly. We'll see. If anything big happens, like massive trades in the middle of a week, maybe we'll get together and do that. But yeah, this is kind of the format of the way this podcast is going to go. Just kind of freestyling whatever we want to talk about at the time. Not really a set schedule, but yeah, so that's kind of the way this is going to go. We will see you guys
When we see you.
beginning of preseason or training camp, whenever that may be. We'll figure it out. But thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time.